Wanted to say a few things to really demonstrate how ultimately we're going to win, because international finance capitalism, the system which has dominated the world since the days of the Boer War, has run out of road, and we can see the results all around of it slamming into the very limits of the earth and of being itself, as I will come to. Soil, folk, kin, to raw material to be optimized, exploited, and ultimately discarded. Yet amid this unsustainability, do we find despair? I say no. No situation is ever hopeless. The past is not a fixed determinant, but a vastness of potential that can always be reclaimed and redefined, and even times of catastrophe yield prospects for resolute action. The last few years have laid bare the weaknesses of a system that demands ever higher compliance while delivering ever lower returns. Global capitalism in its senile phase cannot pause. It must financialize, offshore, import, consume, and abstract, or die. So I ask you, how many more communities must be torn from their roots? How many more lives will be butchered and fed into the machine for the sake of profit margin before we admit what no mainstream party dare confront? Britain's welfare system has metastasized into a vast market in its own right, a market that distorts the very growth statistics the politicians boast about, while forging powerful vested interests, immigration, profiteers, landlords, care industries, and dependency bureaucracies that render the whole edifice simultaneously unsustainable and politically untouchable. The Tories' reform and restore are no closer to an answer than Labour and the Greens. They can kick the can, they can continue the demographic replacement, they can continue the debt slavery, and they can pray the music never stops. But the music will stop, and when it does so, who will be standing amid the ruins of a people separated from its own land? This isn't a mere policy failure in Britain alone. It's the terminal logic of an order that has betrayed the destiny of the West through the tyranny of interest slavery. Modern taxation punishes productive labour, enterprise, and the creation of real wealth, while the financial manipulators, the real parasites, extract compound interest and capital gains without resistance. The folk toil and are taxed. The banks create credit from nothing and are enriched. It's a system that treats people as mere resources. We're taxed to service both the welfare bloat and the endless interest payments on a debt-based system that enriches the few while enslaving the many. Yet in this very darkness lies a veiled hope, a breakthrough in the abyss. The average lifespan of a large company has plummeted from around 60 years in the 1950s to a mere 15 to 20 years today, and still it accelerates its own death spiral. So these are not living institutions bound to a people or a higher destiny. They're spectral machines of extraction. They optimize the share price. They offshore the sacred labor of European kin. They arbitrage the flesh of nations and financialize all that exists, then dissolve before the next quarterly summons. And these short-term managerial incentive structures now exist across every Western institution, private and public. So there's no incentive for people to pour their soul into projects that yield rewards across generations, when the chase for bonuses, promotions, and shareholder value rewards only the most ruthless opportunism. Can any authentic existence of our European folk endure upon such transient ghosts? Can Britain or any nation of the West heed the call of its own destiny when its so-called masters barely outlive a single career, and every institution bows only to the next KPI, the next metric, the next illusion of control? This short-termism is not a bug in the machine. It is the nihilistic essence of the age. The force that devours rootedness, turns the sacred soil of Europe into a commodity, and leaves only a rootless, cosmopolitan horde scurrying after hollow optimization. Yet when European man becomes so lost in frantic calculation that the long subtle webs of managerial liberalism can no longer hold, the spell breaks. The forgetfulness turns upon itself. And from the ruins, the authentic call can once more be heard. The call to imperium, to Europe, a nation reborn in vital spirit, free at last from the chains of international finance. Our young people are showing greater resistance to the multicultural script than the regime ever anticipated. For decades, the propaganda machine has drilled into them that diversity is our strength, borders are bigotry, and British and European identity must dissolve into a rootless, borderless consumer zone. They were meant to be the perfect deracinated subjects, guilty, compliant servants of the system. But are they buying it? Lived reality is forging something far tougher. They inherit the housing crisis, turbocharged by mass migration, the wage suppression, the strained services, the parallel societies, grooming scandals, and the quiet erosion of social trust. Diversity fatigue is real. The innate European preference for the particular, kin, culture, homeland is reasserting itself against abstract ideology. Will this generation really consent to being sacrificed on the altar of open borders and cultural relativism? The answer, increasingly ringing out from the depths, is no. The old order decays from within. Corporate churn, fiscal Ponzi schemes, demographic replacement, and ecological overshoot all point to the same truth. The global capitalist system has no future. Its unsustainability is our opportunity. The very ground from which national rebirth and a greater European destiny must spring. We of the National Rebirth Party reject both the sterile managerialism of the failing regime and any utopian delusions that ignore human nature and the particular genius of our British folk within the broader European soul. We stand for an economy in service to the nation. We will break the power of interest slavery. We will replace debt-based money and usurious finance with national credit directed toward real production, families and infrastructure. We will end the taxation of honest labour while strangling speculative parasitism. We assert biocentric stewardship. Blood and soil are not slogans. They are the very essence of who we are. We inherit these islands. We do not merely exploit them as resource. Will we let cosmopolitan technocrats and financial overlords liquidate our homeland for the next GDP tick and interest payment? Or will we preserve its beauty and continuity so that future generations and the broader European imperium may flourish in harmony here? This is no promise of utopia. It is the harder, cleaner, and more radical promise of a Britain sovereign in her own destiny, demographically secure, culturally confident, economically realistic, ecologically responsible, and liberated forever from the yoke of interest slavery. A vital bastion and spark for the rebirth of the West. A Britain that looks its children in the eye without shame. A people recalled to its authentic destiny. The short-termism that powers global capital is also digging its grave. The multicultural script is losing its spell. The center cannot hold. The system is revealing its own nothingness. It falls to men and women with roots in this ancient land, with the discipline to confront limits honestly, and the vision and ruthlessness to break the power of speculative finance once and for all, to build anew on firmer, more primordial foundations as part of a greater European destiny. For national rebirth, for Britain, for our European folk, for the imperium that belongs to those strong enough to answer the call. Thank you.